Let's talk about language goals for 2025. Today we're going to delve together into these languages, and I'd like to share my experience and what I'd love to achieve. You might say, why am I watching this? To give accountability. There are moments in which we have goals, desires, we want to learn something, we want to achieve something. Much of it often gets lost in the process, and from time to time I'd love to come back to this video in my language learning journey and just have a look at this and say, this is something I wanted to achieve. I also am publicly saying it, so I have an additional reason among all the others to actually be consistent with it. And in addition, you can have a look at how I manage my language goals. I also want to show you some practical tips I use to actually stick to the language learning process. So let's have a look together. The first one might come as a surprise to many. I'm talking about English, but you're an English teacher. Aren't you supposed to know the language perfectly? Aren't you supposed to know English? I mean, you have a very high level of English, blah, 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 blah. It seriously means nothing in the sense I have achieved a C1 level and I continue studying this language every single day because no matter how good I was at some point, I do not live in an Anglophone country. I live in Italy. From time to time, I come to Poland, but I've never spent time in an Anglophone country. And this plays a role because in my everyday interactions, I am the person trying to constantly be surrounded by the language. I search for materials, I try to find videos, articles, I surround myself with the language, but it's not something that happens on a daily basis if I don't decide so. Apart from my language teaching job, because I teach English to Italian speakers, I don't have access to any kind of English speaker. If you eliminate that part of my day, I actively try to find content, books, articles, and also with time, if you do not use the language, no matter how good you are in it, you just start forgetting about some words. There are some of them that get a bit foggy. Sometimes I really need to focus to remember how to say, for example, zattera. I remember during a lesson I could not remember for the life of me the word zattera because I never use it in everyday language. So it's not a complex word, it's not a word that I've never used in my life, but I have not used it for years and then in that moment could not remember. And this can happen for a big part of the advanced vocabulary. You can be extremely proficient but have doubts about some words and forget them, or maybe you have never even encountered them yet. So my favorite ways to practice this are staying consistent on YouTube. I love watching YouTube. I can't think of a day in which I don't consume English material. And I'd love to add also TV shows and films. I got to a point where I can freely watch any kind of content. There might be jargon in it, so I feel a bit ignorant whenever I watch a legal TV show or something concerned with medicine, but that's normal. I would feel lost also in Italian because that's the terminology used in that specific jargon. But it's interesting because I have a look at also different fields, aspects of the language. I follow linguists. I have, for example, the Guardian app on my phone. I always read some articles. I try to follow social media. I follow language pages, so I constantly have also some grammar tips, etc. And that's good to have surrounding you, basically. And another form of practice that I have is that I have course books for proficient speakers, advanced levels. So I try to use course books, I flick through them. Let's move on to langue numéro 2. This is French. And French, I have a long journey when it comes to French. It's been un bordel. I am an intermediate I started this year as a false beginner. False beginner is a person who starts learning the language again. So I wasn't a total beginner, but I struggled a lot. And now I've been practicing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis for sure, probably since the Olympics in a more serious way. And let me tell you, my goals are very clear. I'm a bit scared of saying them. After my slow but steady start, now I want to keep focusing on input. I must watch content. I must surround myself with the language, follow French content creators. I must watch French content all the time and also read French content, French articles. I'd love to try and buy a novel, a simple novel, nothing too complex. And another goal I have is to start being able to watch TV shows by the end of this year. More specifically, I'd love to watch Lupin. Lupin, I'd love to watch it in original language, in French. I did not watch the second season yet. I'd love to rewatch the first and the second in French. It's a very specific goal, and this is actually helping me a lot because I have something to strive for. Some people might say, oh, it's banal, like it's a TV show. Whatever reason. If it works for you and Lupin, it's so interesting for me. Whatever works for you, it's good. If you have the interest and the curiosity to continue and to learn the language, that's great. If you think about the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference, this is the way in which we classify our linguistic abilities in Europe. Considering that, I'd probably love to get to a solid B2 level in French. You can see at what point I was at a couple of months ago. Spoiler, it was bad. Day by day, I see and I sense the progress. I also bought this very little notebook. Handwriting is helping me a lot. I've just started it yesterday, so it's basically blank. But my goal is to be consistent with this. My ultimate goal for the French language this year would be to visit France, at least for a weekend. It's something that doesn't just depend on the language, it depends also on my economical situation. It also depends on other things, but I would really, really love to. And I have this in my agenda. So yeah, visiting France, speaking with French people, communicating without feeling like Emily in Paris. And let me know if you've watched the series, by the way. I've just finished the most recent season of Emily in Paris. Love it. And it actually made me even more interested in learning the language. So yeah. Language number 3, and I'm not able to say this in this language yet. I'm speaking about Russian. Russian is a language that fascinates me, and I'd really like to start learning a new language with a different alphabet. I have approached also Hangul, so the Korean alphabet, and Korean is tough. To be fair, the reason why I want to learn Russian is quite complex, and it's not just about the fascination for the alphabet and the fact that it is a Slavic language and I speak Polish, so I would love to have a second and then potentially another language, a third, a fourth one, which is from the Slavic linguistic family. Russian novels, Russian literature is immense. The feeling I get with this language is that it's like Polish. Whenever I listen to it, it's like as if somebody spoke a Polish that I do not understand, because the sounds and the way it is structured is so similar for obvious reasons, but I do not understand it for the life of me, and it triggers me. I just want to stop feeling nervous, angry and upset whenever I hear some Russian, because it always infuriates me that I feel like I know it, but I don't know it. And this is the actual reason. I am curious about the language. I would love to be able to read it, also because it's spoken by so many people. And my goal for this language is to finish the assimil course book. These books are designed for self-learners and they have been largely recommended by a lot of people. To be fair, I really like a challenge. I'd love to start learning a language from scratch, discovering something new. And in my opinion, Russian is very good to start with. Language number 4, and this is the final big chunk of my linguistic goals, is Espanol. Me and the Spanish language have a sort of flirt going on because basically since I was a child, I've always watched telenovelas, I've always watched TV shows, and I don't know why, I've always been curious about the Spanish language, in the sense, even though I've never studied Spanish, I've always watched these TV shows in the original language with Italian subtitles, which usually I wouldn't do for the Korean language or for other languages. I've always started with the Italian dubbing, and then with time I'd be interested in also listening to the original version. Now, with Spanish, it has always been like this since I was a child, since I was a very young teenager. Always watched Casi Ángeles, Flor, Nini. These are the telenovelas I've watched. There were many more. Can't remember the names now. Patito Feo. These telenovelas in Italy, they were so popular. They were extremely popular among teenagers of my age. And I would always want to see them, watch them in Spanish. So it was Argentinian Spanish, and basically I surrounded myself with the language to a point in which now when I watch or listen to somebody speak Spanish, also thanks to my Italian knowledge, I grasp so much that it's ridiculous. It almost feels like I've almost acquired I've partially acquired the language. So acquiring means that you just absorb so much of the language. You get so much input that you don't study actively the language, but you basically are exposed to it, and eventually you understand it. And this is a flirt I have with this language. Now I want to make things more concrete. I want to make it official. So I'd love to also have a look at the grammar, at the vocabulary, because obviously from input I understand from context. But if I must say something in Spanish, I'm shit. I'm total shit, because I've never even touched any kind of material meant for studying the language. Practicing a little bit could help. It could definitely help. This situation is so bizarre because it's something that started to happen also with Korean. I've made a video about how I acquired some of the Korean very few words and some tendencies they have in the language, a bit of the intonation they have, the registers they have in Korean, thanks to Korean dramas, K-dramas. My ultimate goal with Spanish is to be able, by the end of the year, to consume content, to watch creators, watch TV shows. I want to rewatch, for example, Vis-a-Vis, totally in Spanish, and understand it without the Italian subtitles. My switch, I want it to be Spanish audio and Spanish subtitles, so grasping the entirety of it without Italian support. I was so stupid when I was a teenager. I remember saying, I don't need to study Spanish because it's so similar to Italian. Paulina. I'm very intrigued by these goals, and they're all quite achievable to me. They do not require anything crazy, and the only new language would be Russian, because for this year I want to step up my game. I hate the fact that I get a little bit these languages, I understand them like some bits and pieces. I want to have a good level in these languages. I want to be a user and not just a passive kind of recipient, having this sort of gray area in which I do understand but I cannot communicate, it doesn't serve me any purpose. So I want to be better at this. And the way in which I'd love to conclude the year is by the end of 2025, I'd love to film a video speaking Italian, English, Polish, so my current strong languages. I'd love to include French, Russian, and Spanish. Speaking the languages, actually being able to film a video within these languages. I'm gonna keep track of my progress. I'm going to share this experience with you. I also want to make a quick note on something I'd love to be more educated on, which is endangered languages. I am currently reading different reports. This is something that is scary if you think about it. There are many languages that are starting to disappear, that are starting to die, basically, because there aren't active users anymore. When people stop using a language, that language stops existing. And this is occurring more and more intensely, and I want to show you this graph. There are some countries, there are not many, and within these countries there is the biggest number of languages that is currently dying. And what I'd love to do is be more informed about these languages. I want to educate myself, try to practice also any of these. I'd love to just raise awareness about these, because languages are, in my opinion, such a potent instrument, such a strong tool for our culture, for our development. It unites us so much. It's so beautiful to speak a language and understand another person. And even though you're not from the same country, you create a bridge among the other people, and it's so beautiful. And knowing about the loss of these languages, the potential loss of these languages, when I was reading the article, seriously, it made me so sad. So this year I also want to raise awareness about this. I want to study about this. I want to be diligent and informed. And what about you? What are your language goals? Would you like to improve your English? Would you like to improve another language? What do you want to achieve for this year? Let me know in the comments, what would you like to learn for 2025. I'll be eagerly reading the comments, and thank you for all the support. I wish you a serene 2025, and thank you if you got to this point. I'll see you soon. Here I'm going to leave you my latest video. I've answered some of your most frequent questions. They were about language learning, they were about working out, they were about my teaching job. So I leave this here. If you want, you can click. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Bye.